Welcome to Real Talks. I'm Kiko Lestrange, one of the managers of Real Time and Space, also known as RTS. RTS is made up of 16 studios with 18 artist members. One of our studios is devoted to our residency program. Each resident artist receives a stipend, a 3-month studio space, and a 3-month studio space at RTS. Real Talks is an artist talk series that is a part of our residency program. Let me introduce you to our amazing resident artists. Cristine Blanco is an interdisciplinary artist who works in painting, sculpture, and installation. Her work takes environmental injustices, the precarity of resources, and the lineage as her starting point. Her labor-intense practice combines material and weight to explore both tension and care. Blanco holds an MFA in Studio Arts from Mills College. She is a recipient of California Arts Council Individual Fellowship and a Murphy Cadogan Award. She has exhibited works at Alternative Space Loop in South Korea, Berkeley Art Center, Kalal Art Institute, SF Arts Commission's Main Gallery, Schloss Library, and Soma Arts Cultural Center. Blanco attended residencies at Balao Creative, Residency, and Kalaz Print Public. Jin Zhu is an Oakland-based multidisciplinary artist who works with video and text to examine local housing and environmental justice issues. Her practice often involves interviews with impacted communities, public document queries, collaborations with activists and collectives, attending meetings with regulatory agencies, direct action documentation, and visits to sites of contamination, displacement, or colonization. Her toolkit consists of camera, conversations, and increasingly code. She has presented or exhibited work at SF MoMA, BAMP, the Contemporary Jewish Museum, Southern Exposure, SF Arts Commission Gallery, and the Cantor Arts Center, among others. She holds an MFA from UC Berkeley. Currently, she is particularly interested in conversing about archive storytelling, games, and diving birds. So we will start our talk with Cristine and have a mini break and then go with Jin. Without further ado, Cristine.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining after a long work day, I'm sure, and sticking around on the computer. I'm trying to share my screen and it says host disabled screen sharing.
I got you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I enabled it for you.
Give me 1 second, y'all. Sorry. Okay, sorry. I think I'm having technical difficulties. Sorry, y'all. Give me like 3 minutes to figure this out. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's see. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Show my face. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna try and do slideshow. Is it still on slideshow? Like on a bigger screen, or is it just the Safari? Do you all see a slide?
It's just a gray screen currently.
Yeah, it says click to exit full screen.
Okay, in that case, I'm just gonna do it. Let's see. So sorry, y'all. I'm I'm gonna opt out of the slideshow like full screen and just show you directly from my Google Docs. So sorry if these images are smaller. Okay. Is that okay? Okay. Sorry to spend so much time on that, so I'll try and move really quickly. So this is an image of work that I've been playing around with as soon as I jumped into the studio at RTS. Like Kiko said, I work in painting, sculpture, and installation. I've mostly been working in the past couple years in sculpture. But as of right now, I'm going back into painting and I'm forgetting how difficult that is. This is my artist statement, and for non-artists who are on the call, at least for me as an artist, I have this like love-hate relationship with my artist statement. I feel like it never clearly describes the work that I'm doing. And then also my work is always changing, but then somehow it's still related to what I have kind of formulated in words. So I'll be referring back to this and kind of nitpicking it with you all, and maybe I can get feedback from you. I always like to start off my artist talks with images from just how I grew up. I always enjoy artist talks with images of people and when they were kids and how they grew up. It's always like a nice kind of background in understanding an artist. So this is one of my favorite pictures of me as a kid with my sister. It's us sitting in this like little house, probably Disneyland. And then I'm of course blurry, which kind of sums up how I move in the world, like constantly and just like doing something. And then also the fact that it's like posing in this little home. I'm a homebody. And so a lot of my work is grounded in foundation, home, and being in a place of comfort. This is an image of my parents in a, it looks like a party. So my mom is the woman in the polka dot shirt and my dad is in the blue shirt, and they're both, I just love everything that's going on in here. The fact that they're both looking into the camera, but they're not like right next to each other. They're eating cake. And then also the people in the surrounding photo. Like, I don't actually know who these people are, and I find that always kind of interesting to like look back at old photos and not know who any of these people are. And then the objects above my dad, just like these very ornate objects, like these butterflies, and then there's a shield above him with some pre-colonial weaponry in the Philippines. And I haven't made any artwork on that, but I have been inspired by it. And so this is just something that I've been trying to figure out how to work with and do more research on. And then here's another photo of my mom. And I think this is the house that she lives in now. So I grew up in Union City. I've been there my whole life. It's the same house my mom and her brothers and sisters moved into back in the 70s. And so again, that home that they lived in, like occupied, maybe like 5 families had lived in this house. And so just seeing the changes, even when I wasn't born, and looking back to photos, how much it's changed over the years. And then just like certain objects that really are kind of this like vernacular to like Filipino culture, like the Capiz lampshade above the TV, and then like little knickknacks if you zoom into it. That helps. Okay, still have a couple more images of my parents to show you because they have been really integral in inspiring a lot of my work and how I move in the world. But these two, I've shown this in previous art talks. I always share these two because I just think they're beautiful, of both of them standing in a landscape filled with flowers. And then just realizing like my most recent work has been in me taking in something beautiful, and especially with flowers, and really having that be the focal point. So I did, for some context of these photos, I graduated from Mills in 2020, and so a lot of these images had kind of set the tone for where my work has gone now. But as a way for me to kind of like work through my relationship with my parents, I projected their photos onto myself and created a video installation where I was performing as them, who I grew up thinking they were, thinking who I thought they were in these photos before I was born. And that was a really fun and very cathartic like exercise for myself. Of the photos that I've gathered of my parents, this one has been the one that I've become obsessed with. This is my mom in the 70s. I think she was only 20 years old, and she's posing in a model home. And I knew right away when I saw it exactly what was happening. I just love this photo because of like all the objects, again, very ornate, over the top, dining set, and then this rainbow in the back. And the curtains, just, it's all very just over the top. Again, so she's in a model home, and I knew this because this is something that she would do as a weekend activity with my sister and my cousins and aunts, and we would just like go to these model homes and play pretend. Basically, nobody was ever buying a house. So I took that photo and I recreated it with paper. So process, repetition is also important to my art practice. as a way to get more information, to kind of understand my own personal relationship with the work and themes. And so I recreated this and then burned it, filmed it. And so this is video work that's played backwards, and a lot of thought went into this, not just recreating this image or the objects of this house, of my of the model home with my mom in it, but also thinking about displacement of people. In the last 5 years, fires have been too common, and then also just the rising cost of living in the Bay Area. Like I mentioned, I grew up here. My mom has 8 siblings. My dad has 9 brothers, and half of them, or more than half of them probably growing up, they all lived within the same, I don't want to say block, but neighborhood. And so it was very common for me to just like walk over a couple blocks down, and go to an aunt or uncle's house and, be fed. And so a lot of them just can't afford living in the Bay Area. And so they all like moved out of state or inland or in fire prone areas. And so just creating this work and processing like how things are changing and changing rapidly, and how I grew up is probably not going to be the same for my child, which kind of makes me sad. And then again, I reference the home, this time my grandmother's home, which is in the Philippines. These 2 photos that you see, they're so distinctly like of the neighborhood that my dad grew up in, which is Macabebe. Just like a lot of gray cement, rocks, but then these like potted plants. And it's funny to me because I could see like the correlation of at least in Union City homes that look very similar to this, and how they've like translated into America. So the thing about this home is that it has been impacted by rising sea levels. And so this image was in the mid-90s, and this is the same home. This was, I believe, in 2019. So it's kind of hard to tell, but the foundation has been raised 2 to 3 feet. And so the house has shrunken because my grandmother and I think an aunt and uncle have been living there for, my dad said, like 10 years, with just like water in the house from floods and rising sea levels, that like fish would just start popping up into this still water. And it's not uncommon. There's not the proper drainage system in these neighborhoods. And so as a way to fix the problem, was to source clay from nearby areas and fill it in, and mix that water with the dirt and kind of create their own flooring or cement. So when I made my thesis work around this, it was very much rooted in labor intensive practices, and working with material and weight. So I highlighted this from my artist statement because this is where I've been at now. For me, labor intensive practices have been very crucial to how I create. Basically using my body, my whole body, and having it be very, very physical has been important to me in understanding information. But as of now, where I'm at, it's kind of been in transition. And so I've had to quickly like look back and just simply look at the definition. So as the noun, it's a physical expenditure of physical or mental effort, especially when difficult or compulsory. The services performed by workers for wages as distinguished by those rendered by entrepreneurs for profit. And then the last one, which was kind of like, oh, okay, this is permission for me to like shift how I view labor, is the physical activities such as dilation of the cervix and contraction of the uterus involved in giving birth, which is where I'm at now. So yes, we all already know that labor can mean many things, but for me in practice, it's been difficult for me to shift. So just to give a little bit more information on the extent of my labor intensive practices, these are stairs from my grandma's house. These stairs were really significant for me because it holds memory of when I first visited my grandparents in the Philippines. At the bottom of what was stairs, I don't know if you can see this arrow, was my grandfather's bed. He was very sickly when I first met him, and it was just easier for them to have his bed at the bottom of the stairs. And I just remember hanging out with him there, and it's just wild to think like the symbolism of it, like these stairs are buried, he's no longer alive, and also like just this subtraction of space. So for me to like cope through all of that, it was very startling when I saw it as an adult. I really wanted to like do the same thing that my uncles did to change the house to make it more, I guess, livable in their current situation. I tried to source clay, local clay. So I did some tests, and then I made a model of it. But I couldn't create enough on my own, enough bricks to fill in the stairway. So I ended up using cement for the show, which was in 2021. And I still had these bricks. This picture shows 40 of them unfired. So they're just raw. They were baked in the sun. And it was a very meditative practice to do. I made these during the pandemic, and would like, I think once a week, I would just sift clay from my backyard and just make it. I ended up really enjoying it, but it was a lot. It was very physically demanding. So this was 2021, and then jump to last year, 2022, right? Oh my gosh, I have no concept of time. I went back to those bricks, and was inspired by this textile. This is a traditional pattern of the Ilocos region in the Philippines. And this pattern, and I'm sure it's like not unique to the Philippines, it's seen everywhere. It's like this optical illusion where this bubble is like creating like a dizzying movement. And so it was used, I believe, with fishermen while at sea to protect from evil spirits and confuse them while they were out at sea. So with this work, I was really interested in creating that pattern with these bricks, and asking people the question, what is it that they wanted protected? And so I hosted a bunch of workshops with organizations that I am affiliated with, and invite people to carve into these bricks. These are images of what it was like to actually make the brick. So I ended up having to mix commercial clay and clay that I had sifted to create the two tones. But I also created each mold. So you'll see there's like different sizes of each brick. Also the brick is the engravings are kind of protected and only seen through the photographic version, because I really wanted these to be seen by the person who created it, at least in the physical sense. And these are just images captured from workshops that I hosted. And this, when I did this, I didn't realize how much of a physical, or not physical, I mean, it's still physical, but how much emotional labor this took on. I learned a lot from this and the conversations that I had with people. It was, I hope it was reciprocal, and that it felt healing, especially at a time when there's this longing to start connecting with folks again in the flesh. And so this is what it looks like in the gallery space. So this is ongoing. So this was shown at the SF Arts Commission Gallery, and you'll see a little box here. I've collected over 100 responses to the question of what is it that you want protected. I've mentioned this in my previous artist talk, but I've had to take a break from it because it was so physically and mentally demanding. And I was hoping that I would revisit it during my residency at RTS, but it still felt a little bit too soon, and I want to be in the right headspace for that. So after coming to that conclusion of like accepting, like, okay, it's okay to not keep grinding myself physically with this heavy weight material. And so being honest with myself and figuring out, like, I have found myself going to the complete opposite, and thinking about rest, ease, and softness, which I know is nothing new. I've seen people really, or artists especially, really lean into this. And I feel like I'm kind of late to that at this point, where I've had to have my body actually tell me, like, no, now's not the time to like keep pushing yourself. I'm just so used to putting all my passion in a physical sense that, like, okay, maybe it's okay to do that same thing, but in an opposite direction. So this is a photo of a still life. My uncle had given me a bunch of images from this painter that he came across in the Philippines. And all these images of their paintings were of very physical, or a lot of like people doing labor work, like working the rice paddies, vendors selling food, some of them very political. There was like a gun with a newspaper, and bullets, and it was all very like a lot. And this was the one that to me, I just like kept, and it hangs around sometimes and I'll find it I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I wonder why I have that. So I didn't include the picture here, but I tried recreating this as a exercise um in the space as a way to get it into painting again and moving, exercising my brain in that way. And again, I wanted to share the reference for the first photo that I showed at the beginning of this talk, which are these orchids. And so these orchids have been really important to me. I grew up seeing a lot of orchids in my mom's house, my aunt's house. It's very common, I think, in Filipino households. But these orchids in particular are like a third or fourth generation. So my uncle had propagated a bunch of orchids and then gave some to my mom. And then my mom propagated basically over the pandemic, like a wall full of them. And then she gave some to me, and those are now being multiplied. And I just find that just the act of like sharing beautiful, but also this idea of like how migration works in some ways, and just seeing the beauty in things. So I wanted to jump to paintings that I did in 2021. This is mural work that I did at the end of 2021, which references orchids. I was also in the same space where I'll be like physically at now. Back in 2021, I had just given birth to my first child and I really couldn't do much. It was also 2021. I think we were still not really occupying public spaces. And so I was at my parents' house, hanging out in the backyard a lot, and just being inspired by just all these plants and objects around her home and recreating it. Skipping that. And then jumping to this year, 2023, I decided that I wanted to like, I'm so used to having so much control in the artwork that I make and having a plan, that I really wanted to try and exercise this idea of letting go. And so this is at Slash, their library space, and PJ Polcarpio. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. He's the curator. He reached out to me, and a couple of other artists, and he was putting together a show that was inspired, or is inspired, by Filipino American poet. And he brought this poem to me called Plantings, and I'll read it to you really quickly. And it says, everywhere they go, they plant their garden of bitter melon, odd-shaped eggplant, red, fat tomato, ginger and white onion, all around, bordering the edges. Their yard, delicacies of green tops, banana stalk leaves, spread fans, plantings of no purpose, but no sway, tall and wild, with bamboo in the night air, the islands behind our house. Food first, and then symbols of prosperities, gardenias and birds of paradise. And I just fell in love with it immediately because it just painted with not many words at all, a picture of familiar homes, here, of my mom's garden, aunt's, grandma's garden, but also spaces back in the homeland. And so I basically brought in a mini garden into the Slash art gallery. I'll play this video. Hopefully it works. And that's the poet playing music. I invited people at the opening to set intentions at the beginning of the year while they plant bitter melon seeds and eggplant seeds into the gallery space. And so this was up for about 6 months, and it was very different, obviously, like I said, from the previous work that I was doing, and allowing these plants to just see how they grow. I was hoping that they would fruit by the end of the show, but that did not happen. We had one fruit, one tomato, but it didn't ripen in time. My original plan was to, as time went on, to kind of alter the garden and bring in knickknacks, in the same way that I've seen Filipino gardens kind of change with really random objects placed into gardens. But that didn't end up happening because it just seemed like the work was already there, and this interaction of people feeding the plants and caring for them was what spoke the loudest. And then this is an Oya jar that I created midway through the show to make sure that the plants were being fed. So it's like a very old form of irrigation. You fill it up with water, and then this pot feeds through osmosis the roots of the plants. Okay. So I share all of that to kind of go back to where I'm at now and just painting beautiful things. I have my own reasons and interpretations, but I'm not quite ready to kind of expand on it yet, since it's all very new still. And then these are images that I painted while at RTS this summer, of orchids and kind of their reflection and morphed version on one side. And so, yeah, these are still works in progress, but hopefully I can share a completed version or whatever comes next to you all soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Cristine. So we will have questions after both talks. So I'd like to introduce now to the stage, Jen.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. Before I start, I think I'm not gonna share a screen. I'm just gonna be this. So it might be easier if you pin me, if you go to the participants list and you pin me, or you put your Zoom in speaker view. So but speaker view might not work because if other people talk, which I hope you might, then that might not work. Okay, and actually I have to do that myself. Okay. So this is like, I should say that I'm not a scientist or a historian of any kind. Instead, I'm just kind of in the habit of connecting distant ideas with string and glue. So this is an experiment. Not exactly sure where we'll end up, but I'll try to get you all there intact. And I do want to say some of it is about like grief and grief work, because been thinking about that. So just a heads up so no one is like blindsided. Okay. So I mean, first choice, I always tell people, like, if you have questions, ask, or just make comments, but of course people never do out of politeness. So I think I like to just kind of force the issue a little. And so choice number one for y'all, do you want to hear about like completed past work, or some sort of nomadic map of some thoughts behind work that is slated to be made during RTS? Chat, or someone shout or yell.
Nomadic work, yeah.
Oh, 2 votes, definitive votes. Okay, all right. All right. So let's see. So I also got nostalgic for live streaming, which I used to do, and had this notion that I would just do something really, really tangible instead of the Zoom. So let's see how this works. Let's go to the table. All right, so I've been thinking about how to like organize my work conceptually. And so I keep coming back to this idea of mirrors and lenses. I mean, I do a lot of photo work, a lot of documentary work. So it seems natural to think about it in some ways as a mirror. You know, these are reflections of some sort of reality, right? And I want to group kind of my videos or tracings or stuff that's less tangible. Well, here, I can show some past work. So photos I have done that I happen to have printed are of things in the world. Some of them are out in the DR, some are out in the Western United States. So yeah, things in the world, like a mirror. But then I do other things. Oh, let me. And other things that are more like, I guess you would call an artistic term. I think about like the act of art as kind of like an elevation and a shift, like you spotlight something, you raise something, and then you kind of shift the perspective on it. And that's to me like an art action. But really that's kind of like nonsensical, right? Like these are like lens or mirror diagrams, but really lenses and mirrors are kind of the same object. You can have like a concave mirror and a convex mirror that distorts things, just like you would have an ordinary plane mirror, which is what we might think more conventionally as a mirror. And a mirror is just really a lens with, like, if you think about the back of the mirror, it's like the silver coating that's called the tane. That's really the only distinction. But I mean, mirrors actually were a technology. I feel like we forget, since we take them for granted, that they had to be invented, and flat mirrors are actually really hard to make. And the fact that they reflected reality, it freaks some people out. So this is a book. It's called The Claude Class. And I just find this diagram so hilarious. It's convex mirrors are the devil's ass, is apparently a thing that some people in the 15th century used to believe, because it makes me think about photography too. When photos were invented, people were deeply, deeply suspicious. And it kind of makes sense that going backwards, you should also be deeply, deeply suspicious of lenses. So there's a specific kind of mirror that I gotten interested in. It's basically what we would call a black mirror. It's a Claude glass named after Claude Lorraine. And the idea, I mean, I think about it as a photographer, and it's basically adding a neutral density filter to a scene and making it more painterly. And it's associated with like the picturesque movement in Britain. So you have like, I discovered in midnight internet ramblings these webcam screenshots from Tintern Abbey. So I think that's like one of those things that tourists used to in the 17th, 18th, 19th century go to these views just like tourists today, and instead of looking directly at the scene, they would just hold up this mirror and put their back to the scene and try to like see this thing through this like mediated technology. Like, and so Tintern Abbey set up this quad glass outside in the sleet, in the snow, and all weather, and trained a webcam on it. So at some point there was just a website where you could stream the Tintern Abbey Black Mirror. And so tourists themselves were just made fun of. Like, people wrote books making fun of people who, you know, had their nose in their Claude mirror, so much so that they would, you know, trip over and fall into a lake or fall down in a lane or in a dirty ditch. And I think about the hundreds of photographers backing off a curb while photographing. And I mean, I also think about, you know, am I feeding back? Houses now. Okay, cool. So, yeah, I think about my neighborhood lake as a mirror. And when the sun sets, it's my neighborhood dark mirror. So rich people wanted their gardens to be picturesque, to reflect the fashions of the time, of course. And so gardens have a political element, but we'll come back to that later, maybe. I say maybe because I've been thinking about Carmen Machado's and the Dream House, like choose your own adventure. And I think about like the section in her book where she uses a choose your own adventure to really viscerally like kind of demonstrate instead of analyze or tell about the dynamics of an abusive relationship. Not to compare this to that, but I think since mirrors are doorways, we have choice number 2. Should we go through, let's say, this doorway, or should we go to the dark water? What do you think?
Dark water, definitely.
Everyone chooses death. Okay. All right. So years ago, I wrote into Cal's Ask an Astronomer webpage asking about a hypothetical telescope that could view old light from Earth at a great distance, just as, you know, we view light from the sun. So what I wrote then is, if we reverse our perspective, the light from Earth is similarly delayed. An observer on a distant planet could use the hypothetical ultra-powerful optical device to view this light. 1 light year of travel would equal rewinding 1 year's time. And if we built a telescope hundreds of millions of kilometers wide and could account for the acceleration of the universe itself, we would see the past. So an observer in whatever solar system would see however many light years away ago. And I wrote this out of grief. My grandfather just died in China, and I didn't feel like I had enough from him to keep. And that was my way of comforting myself. If I hadn't created an archive, the universe certainly contains an archive of much of the light that's been reflected off of him. And what I realized from walking around my neighborhood lake over and over and over again is that maybe the lake itself is like an archive. When I walk around the lake, it takes me about an hour, and it's a good time to listen to a long podcast or the same song 20 times, or call friends, or just think through life. But the surface of the lake is really smooth, like a mirror. It feels like it doesn't maybe collect images in the same way that a lens or a mirror does. And the weather almost acts like a cipher, like you're encrypting the image that's being reflected before bouncing it off into space. But that dream telescope I was describing isn't optically possible, and nor is traveling 400 light years away. So really, I just want to travel maybe 20 to 30. Instead, all I can do is maybe send other messages that chase that fast-moving archive and bounce my own light into space, constantly trailing those images of my grandfather that are already out there. So I've been thinking about the lake as a parabolic dish, maybe, and sending out a message or two. So I've been thinking a lot about just like literally dropping messages into the lake, using it as some sort of a transmitter. And like I said, when the sun sets, it becomes a dark mirror. So then we have another choice in front of y'all. Are these messages received or unreceived? Anyone out there? Both. I hadn't thought about that option. Uh-oh. Oh no. Well, well, in that case, I have this dice here. We could roll for it. Unfortunately, this is one of those unfortunate human-made binaries that I made that don't exist in nature. Okay, shall we say odd, unreceived, even received? What is this? 5. That's odd. So wait, that's unreceived, right? All right. And so, like I said, I walk around this lake and it feels like I'm just outlining the same thing over and over again without ever accessing the center, which feels like an untouchable void, except that there are things that can access that center, right? Rowers and birds and a dog. Ask me about that later. And pelicans. So I've been staring at a lot of pelicans. This is how a pelican dives. What it does is it hovers in the sky and looking, circling, and when it sights a flash of silver from the anchovies near to the lake surface, it dives, and it dives in this very specific way, because to protect itself from impact, the pelican has these air sacs in it. This is like, I don't know if this is a good diagram, but along its body, it has these inflated pneumatic air sacs because impact is so harsh on its body. But as a result, it doesn't really sink. It cannot be a pursuit diver. It is a plunge diver. It either strikes and hits its prey or it doesn't. It can't really chase after it because it just floats because of its air sacs. So what this diagram is showing is that it kind of needs to invert before it goes into the water to keep an eye on what it's actually trying to target. And if you watch the pelicans at the lake, they don't really propel themselves like the peregrine. They simply fold up their wings and let gravity take hold. There's a moment where it makes a decision to fall. And I find that I've assigned my grandfather to the brown pelican. There's something about its gestures, the way it yawns, its strange little haircut that reminds me of his short gray hair. I find that I maybe need to assign him to a breath that still continues, still is present in everyday form, and has a relationship with something that I have no access to, know nothing about, that dark water. And I think I count the moments that I think about the pelican. I've started to a count. This is just one of the little experiments that I've been doing. So I could attempt to trace some rice right now, but I'm feeling like that might be too much. But I've discovered actually that my pens can write on rice. And so I've been keeping just a little file of these rices. And I think today, since I'm thinking about pelicans, maybe it's a time to try writing on one. I've only really left them blank for now. I think maybe I want to try dropping one into there that's written on. And then I started doing this, and I've so gratified to find out on the internet that professional rice writers also just use like a blob of clay. This is like long grain rice. Really, I'm kind of disappointed because this doesn't seem that much of short grain rice. Okay. So I think today maybe we write. Oh, you know what I also read on the internet is that if you scrape the surface of the rice, it becomes like easier to write. Okay, here's an image. I think, okay. Mhm. Wow, that's like impossible for all y'all to see, isn't it? Oh, sorry about my mic. I think that's my hair. Sorry. Okay. What's this right here? I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this. I've been thinking about counting just in general as I practice. I've started habit tracking and tracking everything from pelicans to reading, so whether I have soup every day, where it goes, I'm not really sure, but I guess maybe I'll find out in time. Yeah. So that's the end of that branch of the decision tree. I think we could either end it there or we can backtrack.
You mentioned something about a dog?
I don't know if you've been at the lake. There are rowers and there's a coach who is in a motorboat that like says, "It's beautiful, guys, it's beautiful. Keep going, keep rowing." And in her little rowboat is a golden retriever who sometimes just likes to like pop up and stand at the like helm of the boat, just like facing forward, like full on ship figurehead. And so that is the dog. That is the dog of Lake Merritt. Oh, I see. Okay. A vote for backtracking. If I can keep track of all my stuff. Y'all, I have so much stuff right now. All around me. All around me. If we have time, maybe to the lens and start of dark water. Okay. So that was the doorway. Okay. So first, I guess, let's go to the table. Have you looked at this doorway? Like, when we build things, it seems like we tend to, if the doorway is an arch, a mirror arch, tend to square the circle, right? We tend to build rectangular things. rooms. And so I've been thinking about architectural spaces and like these strange the spaces that are not the main spaces, kind of like the void like spaces. So like, what is this space? What is that? That's called, it turns out, a spandrel. And maybe the most famous one that I can think of is one here. So these little triangular areas where this archway and wants to intersect with the rest of the space. So let's see if they have the sort of picture of it. This is also an example. So these little triangular spaces. So Stephen Jay Gould actually wrote about these quote unquote leftover architectural spaces to make a point against a reading of evolutionary theory that presumes that a body, part, or an organ or a feature exists because it has a purpose. He actually skewers it kind of satirically by referring to like the Pangloss character in Voltaire. He says the Panglossian view would be that everything is made for the best purpose. Our noses are made to carry spectacles, so we have spectacles, which is clearly not true. So during the residency last year, I started trying to figure out how to really note academic papers in a way that works for me. And I think there's a quote there that's very good about some this. The paper is called Spandrels and Sanders. Okay, here it is. It's spandrels do not exist to house the evangelist. Meaning that some artists built these spandrel spaces because they were there and that they didn't come into fruition just so that an artist could do something with them. So the term is now used in biology for traits that evolved as a byproduct of other changes rather than the result of direct natural selection. And these could be like vestigial traits, like a tailbone, right? Something that's completely divorced from its original function. The thing is, Gould kind of misnamed this. This is not really a spandrel. This is actually like a pendentive, because these are not flat surfaces. These are, you know, curved surfaces when it comes to dome space. I mean, maybe he did that because spandrel just sounds better, sounds funnier. But I like to think about it as a visual mondegreen, which is the term for when you mishear something. There was this Radiohead song in which I once heard the word arm instead of the lyric heart. And once I heard it, I really just could not ever hear heart ever again. And that made no sense in the song, but that's what I heard. And I give you other examples, but all the ones I found online were like super sexual. So maybe now your choice is pick a perhaps Mondegreenian sound. Would you like aha, or would you like whatever that word is? Jenny, I can't tell if you're like just laughing, or you're choosing haha. Stop choosing both, people. This is impossible. We have a tie. Haha, haha. Okay. Oh no, someone's gonna have to. Is this a democracy or not? We're gonna have to like start tracking the votes. I think that is more Haas. Okay. Well, now we come to the completely unscripted part of the talk that I did not have real time to prepare. So we'll see how this goes. Oh. So what is a haha? Take us back to the picturesque. This is a haha. Like I said, I've been thinking about these strange spaces. Maybe to make it more clear. This is a haha. What it is the it's a sunken fence. So if you had some sort of situation and then you had a cut in it, you decided, oh, we need to make a path right here. And we wanted to cut out this part of the space. This is the wall that retains this embankment. It's kind of like a road cut. Let's think about how roads are built. They carve out a piece of the land into a void. But of course, there are no walls there. But what's interesting about road cuts is they reveal a lot of the geological underpinnings. You can't normally see. Noise that plate tectonics and earthquakes and other forms of shaking and bending that change sedimentary layers. This led me to an interesting story. No, not story, but I found this man to be a really interesting figure because, you know, I'm thinking about the picturesque and gardens, and there are a lot of, you know, Oxbridge educated landscape gardeners and artists and politicians. And this person is, I think his name is William Smith. And he is just someone who works road cutting. He was a builder. Well, roads didn't look like this back then, but he spent decades collecting data from the construction work he did in the country. And as a result, he made the first really geological map of Britain, which is pretty incredible. This is a time when evolutionary thought was just developing, and so people were not necessarily like now familiar with the idea that the deeper down in the earth that you go, the further you reach in time. And I just wanted to show this one too. Some of his maps are just very gorgeous. And this is a time when, like I said, it's almost proto-Darwinism. Charles Lyell is just starting to think about geology. And this is the frontispiece to his most famous book about geology. And it depicts this site in Italy where this Roman market, which I suppose you would call a Macellum. This is what it's then, and this is what it looks like now. It's been rising and falling. There's a broader picture of it throughout time. Its elevation has changed, and maybe you can't see that close up, is that on these columns are little holes made by sea creatures, like boring sea creatures that have become fossilized. And the site became really important for realizing that there's an element of receding time, which I think about as a void, that the sea recedes and the site rises and falls. And as a result, these fossilized things come up into the surface where we can observe them. I think about it as like a negative void. And it almost makes me think about a different kind of gardening. What happened if you gardened over the course of centuries with, I guess, not inorganic materials, but man-made materials. It also makes me think about, I think this whole thread was really just an excuse to show, pictures of this guy. This is an ambulocetus. It's significant because it's like a missing link. When Lyell and Linnaeus eventually, the scientists that developed that line of thought, like, eventually developed thinking about the traits of animals as ways to determine who ancestors are and who inherited what from whom. Often they find fossils and there were missing ancestors in there. There are ways that traits couldn't be bridged, and ambulocetus was one of those moments where you discover something that's like the bridge between land and sea. I just love this rendition of it. And I think this is just me thinking through the ways that I inherit stuff and the ways that, like I was talking about, the dark water, where I receive or don't receive messages from ancestors. So after my grandfather passed in 2015, my grandma discovered in his writing desk, and I think it's this desk, a letter that he had written to me from back when he was visiting us in the States in the 1990s. So that's, I guess if we're thinking astronomically, that's about as far as it is to one of the nearest Earth-like planets. TRAPPIST-1, which is about 22 light years away. And so maybe if I were able to get to TRAPPIST and build my telescope, I would see him writing it. So she read that to me in 2019. And how it starts is he says, okay, there's a little aside on Chinese. So in a Chinese word, radicals carry meaning. So if you have a word like seed, it means seed, but it can also mean seed in the figurative sense, like progeny, like children. And so how that can be is some words have radicals like this. So this would be a radical based on this character. And here with this, become the word for child. So yeah, that's how that letter began. Six, 7, 8 years since it was. And I feel the distance between me and that letter very, very acutely. She read it to me, but I didn't anticipate the pandemic in 2020. And so I left it in China. And I know exactly where it is. It's in this desk. And they kept a lot of our furniture actually when we moved to the States. They kept this wardrobe. It's now in their room. So this wardrobe and mirror is still there in their place. And if a mirror is a doorway, then I want to use it to question their space, to send feelers out into their room. Ask what happened to those plants and how many mirrors there have been seasoned with their image. But with COVID, I'm not really sure when the next time I'll be able to go is, and that makes me think, why do I need to remember? What would it mean if I heard that letter once and let it go instead of hanging so hard onto it, having it tug and thrash me around? What would a grieving process look like if I heard it once and purposefully, naturally, just forgot it and let it go? Like an act of forgiveness against eternity, I guess, against the urge to make a monument out of everything, pickle and preserve everything, and instead lean into what we are and what my brain will eventually do anyways. There's my grandpa and my grandma. Yeah. So that's the end of that branch. And the end of the experiment, I suppose.
Yay, awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Jen, for that. That was really beautiful and awesome. Both pieces, and also how it ended. Wow. So I'd like to open the floor for anyone who has questions for Cristine or Jen, and or not just questions, but also comments. Wow, a really chatty crowd, really chatty. I will say I like the use of photography or images from y'all's past in both y'all's work. And yeah, like it feels like, I don't know, like I kind of do similar acts of like holding imagery of my parents or my grandparents, and there's people or objects within those images that I have no idea who they are or what they are or what they're for, but also like knowing that like whoever's in those images with my family or loved ones, it's like I've been thinking a lot about us as a people and a society, as well as just like beings, and like our greatest gift to one another is connection. And oftentimes because of how we are and how disgusting we can be, I guess, things get lost. But also I think there's this wonderful thing I feel in myself and my work in my generation of like trying to hold on to those things and know that like even though I don't know who those people were or what those objects were, that there's power and beauty, and I'm connected to that because they held a place with my grandparents or my great grandparents or my parents, and there's like this lineage of that. And also I just thought a lot about just like beauty with both of y'all's talk, and a lot of like how like individuals who are marginalized and like there's so much eraser, and like for me, I know why I save certain images, and I know why I hold them so dearly, because oftentimes we don't see that sort of beauty like within our day-to-day, within when we were kids, when we were like teens, when we were 20, when 30, however our ages, and like it's meaningful and impactful to save those and to use that within my work or to talk about it when I like in an artist talk or within my own practice, because it's valuable, and not just valuable, but to also show like they were here. They had beauty, they had grace, they had amazing, wonderful things to offer to everyone and to their own loved ones. So I felt a lot of that between both of y'all's work, and it was just really amazing. So thank y'all for sharing y'all's talk and your work.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Cristine, when you showed like the steps and where your grandfather's bed used to be, I was just thinking like, wow, this like these two talks are really gonna dovetail, and like what you said about your grandparents like really has like made me glad that I wanted to talk about this section of my work. And what you said, Kiko, also, I think it makes me think of the novelist, I'm gonna butcher his name, but Viet Thanh Nguyen is written a book called Nothing Ever Dies, and it's about like Vietnam memorials and the way that remembering or forgetting is a very political act. And so I guess I have that on my mind as like the antidote to what I said about thinking about forgetting as grief work, because it also seems like you're saying like very, very important who gets to decide what is remembered or what is forgotten and erased when it comes to like marginalized communities, especially. Yeah. I see in the chat how much writing is in my practice. Not anything that would make me call myself a writer, but I have, I think, more in the last couple of years during COVID, thought more about literature, and I've always been a very just omnivorous and literary reader, and the last couple of years I've thought more about incorporating more writing. I was hoping, I had this idea about 2.5 weeks ago, and I was hoping that it would be much more polished and scripted, but that didn't quite happen with this idea of branching. But I do think, at least for this idea and the next works that I'm working on, which is not exactly resembling this, but I would like to write a very solid script. Yeah.
I just want to say, I was really appreciating the format of the way images with the picture of your desk, the sort of the natural wood of the desk, and then these sort of images sliding in and your hands manipulating and objects. There's a kind of a delight in watching a story unfold, and the kind of soft dynamism of images not kind of presented. I mean, it's on a screen, but it somehow doesn't feel like it's on a screen if it's being moved through space. There was a kind of an immediacy to that I was really appreciating. Thank you for just the whole story was just beautifully constructed. Well done.
Thank you, Ollie.
I really enjoyed too, Jen, your storytelling. It's so beautiful and it feels so intimate, like we're just getting right into your thoughts. And hearing you talk about your grandpa, I often think, like, going through my own grief journey in the last few years, that it can bring you to such a vulnerable, almost childlike state. And when you're processing that, it can bring this creativity. I don't know. I think you can think sometimes people say that you shouldn't make decisions from a grief state, but I haven't like helped but wonder that maybe you're closer to who you really are when you're tapped into that feeling. Because it does, I think, sometimes bring you to this like childlike wonder. This kind of like magical realism thinking. So I loved getting to hear you talk about like all these things that connects for you when you think about him, both in nature and just in memories. Anyway, thank you. I really appreciated it. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Mommy. I think there was a question for Cristine in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cristine, Curse of Avalon asked, can you tell us how your softer work is helping? Do you feel like the opportunity to work as softer media is healing for you?
I just want to piggyback really quick and add on to, I really did enjoy the format, Jen. I think it's very apparent that like you should keep doing it, and it feels very natural as somebody taking it in as a viewer. Just the intimacy of it just helped at least like my brain shift in taking in information, especially in a Zoom format. So thank you. How has the softer work help? It feels strange to share this because I'm still processing it and understanding how I'm working through it, and just like the way that I work not just in art, but like how I move through the world is very like, this has to get done. And I hate saying this, but like by any means necessary. And that's just like how my parent, maybe, I've taken this on from my parents of like, make do with what you have kind of mentality. And so it's very hard working. So it's still a process. It does feel healing, I will say that. But it always, when I find myself like relaxing into this painting work, I'm like, oh, I remember when I first got into art, and taking art classes in the traditional sense, like how freeing that was, even though it's like very traditional. So yeah, it feels like starting over again, which is exciting.
Did you find that it came naturally to you to kind of make that shift into softness, or I don't know how to phrase it, but like, did you find that you actually had to like work at like relaxing or softening up after, your practice was based on labor?
It was not by choice. It was by being overworked in different areas of my life, and having conversations with people like, oh wait, this doesn't have to be this way, so sometimes okay, I just don't want to get too deep into it, because there's like other aspects of life where things happen and it makes you realize like, oh, kind of, yeah, just thinking about grief and like trying to make things in life more beautiful when bad things are happening. So we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, if there's no other comments and questions, thank you so much, Cristine. Thank you so much, Jen, for your talk. Cristine is leaving us, but we are still going to keep up to date with everything Cristine will be doing, and Jen will be with us for the next 3 months, and you will be seeing what she's up to on our Instagram and social platforms. But thank you too for your talk. Thank you for everyone for joining, and have a great night.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.